All right, let's talk about something that's on a lot of people's minds. We're going to break down the real science behind whether marijuana is actually bad for your brain.
So let's just get right to it. Is recreational marijuana actually bad for your brain? I mean, with laws and just general attitudes changing so fast, this is a huge question. But here's the thing. The answer isn't a simple yes or no. Not even close. And to really get why it's so complicated, you got to look back a bit. See, back in 1970, marijuana was slapped with a Schedule I classification here in the US. That's the most restrictive category there is, and it basically just slammed the brakes on any real scientific research for decades. Now, fast forward to today, and we're acknowledging all these therapeutic benefits, but that big original question about recreational use, it's kind of just been left hanging.
Okay, so to really figure this out, we have to go inside the brain. We need to understand the amazing system that marijuana actually interacts with. It's your body's own natural cannabinoid system.
Yeah, it's called the endocannabinoid system, and you can think of it like a master control system for your body. It's this huge network that's constantly sending messages to fine-tune everything, kind of like the conductor of an orchestra, telling all the other signals when to play louder or softer.
Now here's where it gets really cool and honestly kind of weird. See, most signals in your brain travel in one direction, right? From neuron A to neuron B. Simple. But this system, it works backwards. After neuron B gets the message, it sends its own message back to neuron A. It's basically a feedback loop. It's like neuron B is saying, hey, got it, thanks, you can chill out for a second. It's a way of keeping everything in balance. So where does marijuana come into all this? Well, this is where THC shows up. You know, the main psychoactive part of the plant. And what THC does is it basically hijacks this whole beautiful, elegant system. And the difference is huge. It's like the difference between a quiet, precise whisper and a deafening, chaotic shout.
Let's really break this down, because this is the key to everything. Your body's natural messengers, those endocannabinoids, they're like little snipers. They're released in a very specific spot for a very specific reason, super targeted. THC is the total opposite. It just floods the entire system, binding to all these receptors everywhere, all at once. It's not a targeted whisper. It's a massive, system-wide shout.
And that right there, that's the reason why the experience of using marijuana is so wildly different for everyone. You know how one person can feel relaxed and another can feel anxious? It's because THC's effect is so widespread. How you react depends on your specific brain chemistry, your genetics, your life experiences, the whole shebang. It's way more variable than other drugs that have a more direct target.
Okay, so if the effects are so personal, what about the risks? Are they personal too? Well, yeah. The science is pretty clear that the risks are definitely not the same for everyone. Researchers have been able to pinpoint some very specific factors that make negative effects more likely.
And the biggest, clearest risk factor we know of, by far, is age. And there's a magic number here, and that number is 25. Why 25? Because that's roughly when your brain finally finishes its major construction project, particularly with something called white matter. Think of that as all the wiring, the superhighways connecting different parts of your brain. It's absolutely crucial for learning and high-level thinking.
So, for a brain that's still under construction, let's say, regular marijuana use can really throw a wrench in the works. The research suggests it can mess with the development of those important communication highways, make it harder for the brain to build new connections, and potentially impact things like long-term learning. And it's really important to get this. The risk is on a sliding scale. It's way, way higher for a 15-year-old than it is for someone who's 22.
All right, there's another risk we have to talk about, even though it's much more rare. It's called marijuana-induced psychosis. Now that sounds scary, but basically it's a temporary state where someone might experience things like hallucinations or extreme paranoia. For most people who experience this, the symptoms just go away as the high wears off. But for a small group of people who are already vulnerable, it can get more complicated.
And the biggest red flag for this kind of reaction is genetics, specifically having a family history of psychotic disorders like schizophrenia. Now, this is where the science is still pretty fuzzy, to be honest. We're left with these huge questions. Does marijuana just bring out a disorder that was going to happen anyway, just earlier? Or is it a catalyst? Does it push a vulnerable brain over a tipping point? Right now, we just don't have a solid answer.
So, where does that leave us? We've got this complex brain science on one hand, and these very specific risk factors on the other. How do we come up with a final verdict? Well, it's not about a universal rule. It's all about putting the risks into context and seeing it as a kind of personal equation.
And speaking of context, this is a really important piece of the puzzle. First off, unlike a lot of other substances, it's basically impossible to have a fatal overdose from marijuana. It just doesn't happen. And withdrawal? Yeah, it's a real thing. People can get irritable or have trouble sleeping, but it's usually pretty mild and temporary. It's nothing like the sometimes life-threatening withdrawal you can see with other drugs.
So let's circle all the way back to the beginning. Is marijuana bad for your brain? After looking at all the science, the only honest answer, the only accurate answer is it completely depends on who you are. Your age, your genetics, your family history, they all get plugged into this very personal equation.
So what's the takeaway here? The risks aren't one size fits all, but for some people, they are absolutely real. And there's still a ton we don't understand. Which means the final question, well, it isn't really one for scientists to answer for you. It's a question for you. Knowing what you know now, how do you solve that equation for yourself?